It's not often that I find someone whose Venn diagram overlaps so heavily with my own. But on this episode of Forge and Anvil, I will be joined by Kenny Cody to discuss his important work in the intersection of politics, church life, and Christianity. All this and more, so stick around. Welcome to Forge and Anvil, where we hammer out uncomfortable conversations to sharpen ourselves for the cultural, political, and spiritual war that we are living in. My name is Connor. I am host of this podcast. I am a husband, a father, and a follower of Christ Jesus, just doing my best to represent him well wherever I can. As I mentioned in the intro, I am joined tonight by Kenny Cody. So, Kenny, go ahead and say hello, introduce yourself to the audience, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Hello, listeners. My name is Kenny Cody. I am a conservative columnist for a couple websites, humanevents.com, newsmax.com, and townhall.com. I'm also the chairman of the Cocke County Republican Party here in beautiful southeastern Tennessee, or northeastern Tennessee. And I am a church member here at Bethel Baptist Church in Perrysville, Tennessee. I'm a very active member as of shortly later on last year. And I'm also a school teacher, so I teach government and junior English speech at Cosby High School here in my home county. Been in politics for a pretty long time, just to be 28 years old. I've been chairman of my county Republican Party since I was 22 years old. I've had the experiences over the last year of having my pieces shared by people such as President Donald Trump on conservative cultural issues, on the political culture surrounding the Republican Party and surrounding our world, and having the honor of attending events such as the SBC with my friend Connor here just a couple of weeks ago, and representing my church to go conservative in the ways of biblical and ethical moral values, sustaining the Christian Baptist faith. So honor to be on with you, Connor. Honor to talk to your listeners and discuss issues that are very pertinent to our world.
Awesome. Well, glad to have you, Kenny. Yeah, before we dive straight in, for you listeners, go ahead and go on over to our Substack, forgeandanvil.substack.com. You can put in your email there to get updates on the show, as well as, of course, the episodes themselves sent straight to your inbox, and any additional content that I put out there. Feel free to repost this stream far and wide. We really appreciate it. It does help us break through the algorithm, so we really appreciate that. And, of course, feel free to follow me on Twitter or X at Forge and A for additional content and updates on the show. We really appreciate you guys listening. So, yeah, we'll go ahead and dive in, Kenny. So there's a lot of different things that I could talk to you about, because you and I do have so many shared interests, both being, Tennesseans, both being involved in the world of politics, as well as church politics with the SBC and culture as a whole. But for now, it might be a little bit dated by the time that this episode airs, since we are pre-recording tonight. So, chat, if you're blowing us up, apologies for that. But obviously, we just had a debate this last week, and as of tonight of the pre-recording on Monday, there's been a ton of talks about Biden and dropping out. Maybe he's dropped out in the last hour, and I haven't noticed since I haven't been on my phone while I've been live streaming. But Kenny, what's kind of your overall take on the current political landscape when it comes to the presidential race?
Well, first of all, just on the debate in general, I was a collegiate debater actually in college, so I always watch the debates and kind of study their mannerisms, study, hand motion, study body language and things like that. And I can undoubtedly say I've watched every presidential debate since about 1960, when the first one with Nixon and Kennedy was televised. It was the single worst performance by a presidential incumbent that I have ever seen in my lifetime, and it'll end up being the most consequential too. Nate Silver put out and I know people don't like Nate Silver because of 538, but Nate Silver is now opposite and is now shifted over and away from 538. He's doing his own political independent polling, and it is the single worst drop off post debate in presidential candidate history. So it's not just being conservative or Republican and acknowledging how bad this debate performance actually was. I mean, we saw an incompetent meat puppet basically debating one of the best debaters, like him or hate him, in presidential debate history, and Donald Trump. And he was just a complete trouncing on thoughts about him dropping out because of how incoherent that he sounded. I think, unfortunately, the Democrats are stuck.
Mm.
I don't think there's a lot of things that you can actually do at this juncture in the political realm to remove Joe Biden. They've actually tried to, the DNC is actually trying to move up the convention date and trying to move up the convention nomination speeches solely so they can keep Joe Biden on the ballot, because all their bench is and their bullpen is so bad. Harris, Whitmer, Newsom all do worse than Joe Biden does when it comes to their polling against Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So I think they're stuck with him. I mean, they're going to have to figure out some sort of damage control to kind of help control where he's going to be in terms of polling. But I don't think the option is dropping out at this point. Like I said, unless it's literally happened within the last hour or 30 minutes, I don't believe we're going to see Joe Biden drop out. We're going to see another rematch between two presidents going back and forth at each other. And I don't see a path for the Democrats at this point. But you got to realize something. And the viewers have to realize this too. This is what the Democrats wanted. Okay, they risked doing this when they basically changed the rules in 2020 for mail-in ballots, for universal mail-in ballots across this country to get Trump out of office. They knew nominating a elderly 70-year-old man, not necessarily somebody that's old, somebody who has the mannerisms and mentality of an elderly person. They knew the risks nominating him in 2020, that if they renominate him in 2024, this may be the result that they get. They were willing to risk that in order to rob Donald Trump of a second term. And they're reaping what they sow at this point. They knew the risk. Let them lie in it. There's nothing they can do. The only thing that they can do potentially is try and cheat the election system again, or actually imprison Donald Trump, or just hope that he makes his own mistake. But there's nothing individually that the Democrat Party can do with their candidate besides just sitting back and watching him lose. And that's the only pathway that I see at this point.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you 100% on that. As far as where we go from here, I know Congressman Chip Roy has talked about the 25th Amendment. In my mind, it seems like a good idea. At this point, I think we should try to take control of the situation, make them own the fact that the entire Democratic Party and, of course, the mainstream corporate media for that point have been telling us for years that Biden's sharp as a tack. And it was just like last week, even they were saying sharp as a tack. And then this debate happens. And suddenly so many of these individuals that were only getting their news from corporate outlets for the first time truly saw Joe Biden gaffe. I didn't even think it was as bad as some of his other gaffes that we've seen. But of course, those of us on the right, we're kind of used to it. We're desensitized. But so many individuals now, they're seeing it for the first time and realizing, oh, shoot, this is truly a train wreck. But I think now the 25th Amendment would be a mechanism to hold these people accountable. We can start investigating who knew about this for how long. How long has Biden been in decline? We see Hakeem Jeffries and other people were meeting with Biden on the regular, Pelosi to talk about legislation. So who knew? How many people knew? How long has this been going on? Because, of course, you and I, Kenny, are both aware that Biden has been declining since he started running in 2020. But it's become very obvious that at least for the last 4 months or so, his decline has accelerated significantly by all the evidence that we've seen online. So what's your take on 25th Amendment? Are you for it? And yeah, just go for it.
No, the only part where I disagree probably with the 25th Amendment, even though I think that the 25th Amendment would probably be necessary before now, if that makes sense. I wish the 25th Amendment would have been enacted a year or two ago, maybe 2 years into Biden's presidency. But to be honest with you, Connor, as kind of malign this might be, I kind of want to let them suffer. Like you did. This is the bed that you decide to lay in. This is the candidate that you decided to risk it all with. So there's no point in it. I mean, the administration is going to continue the way it's going to go, and there wouldn't be anything that happened. Like, what are you going to do? Take Jill Biden out of power at that point? Like, it's still Kamala Harris, Barack Obama's administration. I mean, if she's the president, if Barack Obama is going to be an advisor, and kind of a dark advisor, he's not in any official capacity, but it's inherently a third Obama term, as all Biden's presidency has been the entire time anyway. Got the same advisors, got even more progressive leaning people running his administration, making these cabinet appointments, making these State Department appointments that he has. I mean, you've seen the people in dresses and dog masks the Biden administration is littered with. He's not doing that. It's the same people who put him in power in the first place. So I don't think there will necessarily be any tangible difference. And I've heard a lot of people say, they're going to try to replace him at the convention. They're going to try and, get Whitmer or Gavin Newsom or anybody else like that. But the people don't realize at this point the only person that they could really nominate, and you're talking about the right thing here, the 25th Amendment, would be Kamala Harris. Like that is the only feasible person that they can actually replace Joe Biden with, and that would only be because he resigns. And I'll be honest with you too, Connor. Chip Roy talks a big game, and a lot of these Republicans talk a big game. They're not going to do that. These Republicans are not going to bring it in front of Congress to bring the 25th Amendment. They don't have the gall to. We have the weakest slate of Republican legislators that have been in the history of Congress. Because at least back when there were weak Republicans in the 1990s and the early 2000s, there were also weak Democrats. But the problem is our enemy is stronger than we are. They're more willing to stand on their principles and their ethics and their morals than we are. Even though we are trying to uphold conservative Christian values, people like me and you, we are on the outskirts. People who control the party, people who control Congress are on the inside. They're the ones that allow Democrats and progressives to take over the morality of Congress. And our Republicans, Chip Roy, the reason he's saying that is because he knows there's no way that it's going to happen. I'm glad that Mike Johnson seems to be a good dude, but he's no stronger than Kevin McCarthy was, or probably no stronger than anybody in leadership is ever going to be. So while I appreciate the sentiment, Chip, you probably should have brought this before the entire country saw it. Maybe give the people a little bit of a warning on what since you're in Congress. You probably should have brought this about a year ago, back when you were campaigning for your buddy Ron DeSantis. Maybe you should have been bringing the 25th Amendment up to actually get Biden out of office, since you had more intel of being a congressional member than most people of society actually have. Like, you're basically an insider trade when it comes to knowing about presidential and cabinet information. You should have brought this a year ago, not just when it becomes relevant to the general public after seeing him on the debate stage. If you knew this much information, you knew more than what he revealed at the debate. So while I appreciate the sentiment from Chip Roy and others, you're not going to do that. Chip Roy just want to make headlines for his reelection campaign, unfortunately. But I really wish that it would have been done a year ago, because now it's just looked at as a political ploy, unfortunately. And I wish we had Republicans that would actually stand up and have done this a year ago when he was having all the gaffes that you just mentioned a few minutes ago too.
Yeah, I definitely see your point. I think the logic behind the 25th Amendment, if Republicans were to grow a spine and actually do it, would be the opportunity to dig deeper into this whole situation. Yeah. Because I think that right now there are many people that are currently awakened for the first time to realizing just how bad Biden's cognitive decline is. And so it'd be more of the opportunity to really make them own it. Yes, you guys pulled a weekend at Bernie's, and now so many people are seeing it. And let's talk about who's really running the country, because I think that's what the real question boils down to. Is the reality is it's kind of evident that we have a shadow government happening right now, because it became very evident to those of us who watched the debate that Biden is not calling the shots. I think, he's got his moments where he's able to think clearly, but everyone could tell he was being led by Jill Biden. And whether it's Jill Biden or Obama, whoever's calling the shots behind, I think an opportunity like the 25th Amendment may allow us the chance to actually explore further and get to the bottom of it. I tend to agree with you, though. I think it's not going to go anywhere, but we in an ideal situation, that would be the political move to actually take control of the situation, instead of just allowing them the time to regroup and then eventually gaslight and pretend this whole thing never happened. And if they were to remove Biden, it'd probably be some virtuous stepping down, realizing that he's no longer able to handle this, so he hands it off to the next generation. But either way, to go to what you mentioned earlier about polling, you mentioned that Newsom, Whitmer, and Kamala are all polling lower than Biden. And I think that's something that keeps getting missed in the dialogue. So many people think if Newsom ends up being their guy, we're going to get destroyed. I really don't see that. I think so many individuals know that Newsom is synonymous for COVID failure. I mean, he's ruined the state of California, and it's going to be pretty hard for them to sell us. They're going to go from a man that was pooping his pants to a man that has a poop map, in San Francisco, and try to pretend that he's at all competent to run the country. I really don't think it's going to work. But I mean, what's your take on why the polling is low? Do you think it's just because the country hasn't been properly introduced to Gavin Newsom? What's your take on that?
I mean, I think so back in 2020, I told a lot of people that Biden is who I wanted the least in terms of presidential nominees. Like I would rather nominate Bernie, Kamala Harris. I feared Tulsi Gabbard a little bit more than Biden just because I know Tulsi can reach out to the independents and moderates kind of like she has now that she's kind of converted over to being a Republican Party surrogate. But Biden comes off as a moderate old man and likable, like everybody's grandfather, like to the modern people who do not pay attention to politics like me and you do. And that's not insulting. That's just somebody who is a casual, right?
Right.
Like
They're just seeing curated clips from mainstream news outlets, corporate news outlets, I should say, not mainstream. We're the mainstream now.
It's kind of being a casual sports fan, right? Like I love the NFL, but I love the NFL because of like fantasy football. Like I love watching it because of fantasy. I don't have a favorite team. I cheer on the Tennessee Titans, when they play, and I hope they win and stuff like that. But I'm not as much a Tennessee Titans fan as I'm a Tennessee Volunteers fan. So I don't keep up with it. But like somebody, like if the Houston Texans had a fan that knows a lot about the Houston Texans, they're going to know more about it than me. But I'm still going to acknowledge that, hey, I like C.J. Stroud, right? But in the same way, the casual fan or the casual voter in this regard looked at Joe Biden as this approachable old man, elderly, like he has good intentions, he's got good morals because it's this old Uncle Joe Biden. Like that was the whole entire selling point in 2020. So people still view him like that. Like maybe not as much after the debate, but still he is still likable to a lot of independent voters. Like they say, yeah, he's old, but I still think he's a good man. They don't look into the evils of what his administration has done during COVID-19 on cultural conservative issues, things like that, like what he's doing to being for the mutilation of children and all that kind of stuff. Like they don't look into those depths. They don't look into foreign policy. They don't look at the things that actually matter. But so with Newsom and others, they kind of see that new progressive age. Like they see it with Whitmer. I mean, she failed on COVID-19. You look at Gavin Newsom. The reason that the infiltration, the reason why Florida's done so well is because he has taken the advantage of the population that has moved into Florida and had good policies to make people stay. And Gavin Newsom's policies have made people go. Like all you have to do to argue against Gavin Newsom is look at the population decreases within his tenure in comparison to somebody like Governor DeSantis, Governor Bill Lee, or anybody else, and say, why are people leaving? Not just because of the sheer number of Californians and the sheer number of population state that California is, but look at the percentage of people that left from years prior to during Gavin Newsom's term. That's all you really have to do. Like if the modern American citizen doesn't enjoy California and they're moving to red states, that shows that blue state policy is not working for the everyday American. That's all you have to sell if you're Gavin Newsom, or if you're going. I think I feel like Gretchen Whitmer a lot more than I do Gavin Newsom. I mean,
I tend to agree.
I mean, at least Whitmer's well liked in her state, it seems like. I mean, Newsom got recalled. I mean, is anybody forgetting that? Like, he had a recall vote, for goodness sake. So, Whitmer, I'd fear a little bit more because she lives in a blue state. She lives kind of in a swing state. She has a very high approval in a swing state. Gavin Newsom barely has a high approval rate in the deepest blue state in the country. So it's really hard for me to believe that he could be the nominee, let alone beat Donald Trump in an election where he's doing better with the independents than he has any time in the last 10 years. So, I mean, I think that the argument is there, like to say, hey, we need a new age, I need a gubernatorial guy or a new governor to lead the party, whatever. And he's the governor of the biggest state. And the governor of California, when they're a Democrat, is always going to be in consideration to be a presidential nomination. If like when Arnold Schwarzenegger was running for when he was the California governor, there was literally an amendment, I think, either in the California legislature or actually in the U.S. Congress to actually draft Arnold and change the Constitution so he could be the Republican nominee for president. Like that was a real movement because he is the governor of the biggest state. So, all this stuff about, we're going to see Newsom or we're going to see Whitmer. The reason that they're all polling worse is because they're all unlikable. The new generation of Democratic leaders is unlikable. And that's kind of why we have to nominate somebody like Trump and somebody from this new age Republicans, because we are likable. Like we're staying for the right things. We're not just standing by getting run over like a carpet. Like we're not just sitting there getting run over like getting stepped on in a doormat. Like we're actually standing up for the issues that matter to the everyday American and adopting this populist message that's good for the issues that people care about. I mean, capitalizing on populism is the most ideal political strategy in the history of the modern GOP. Like actually, all populism is, and I can't tell you, Connor, how many times I've said this on podcasts. All populism is is a political strategy to identify the issues that people actually care about and find conservative solutions to them. That's why populism is a cross-branding strategy. It's saying, hey, what do these people care about? They care about immigration, okay, deportation, okay. If you're a Democrat, what do these people care about? Immigration. Okay, we're going to identify and we're going to adopt amnesty issues. We're going to adopt the easier path to legal immigration. That's how those two opposite parties take populism and try to find solutions for their ideology. It's not necessarily an ideology itself, but it's a strategy. So I think the new GOP, now that we have given way to populism, which is a good thing, that makes us a little bit more popular in the culture. That's why it's cool to be a Republican right now. We are the counterculture because of our adoption of populism and nationalism. So in the same way, Democrats are kind of failing on that. With Whitmer, with Newsom, and others, they're kind of losing the abortion battle in a way. They're losing the immigration battle, and they don't really know where to turn. And their only hope is this old man with dementia that's going to be running against Donald Trump and is going to keep on destroying him on debate stage. It's their only hope to win in November, and they know they're probably cooked.
Yeah, well said. So that being said, just to continue on talking about the presidential candidacy before we move on to some other topics, obviously we have some more big events on the near horizon. Trump is going to find out ultimately what his fate is on the 11th. And so we're going to find out whether or not Trump is going to actually face any serious jail time. And then, of course, as a result of him hearing that on the 11th, for all we know, the judge could sentence him to Rikers Island that very same day. So we're hearing chatter that maybe a vice presidential pick will happen before the 11th. I hope that is the case. So my two big questions for you, Cody. I tend to think that Trump is going to go in jail. I think that the left can't help themselves at this point. They've boxed themselves into a corner. The only thing that's left is jail and other nefarious acts. So that being said, first question, do you think Trump will go to jail? And then the second question, another big one, what's your take on vice presidential picks? Who do you think would be the best in terms of boosting the ticket to see a possible Trump White House win?
So the only things that I think about the convention that may change, because I think I actually saw this in the news about like a couple hours before we went on. So since the Supreme Court decision today about having some partial immunity for presidential immunity that the Supreme Court decided, that could be used either in an appeal or it could delay a decision. So there might be an initial sentencing on the day that Trump is, I think it's July 14th, or maybe I forget when the actual date is, but when that happens, I think that may be so he may get sentenced to jail, like he may get sentenced to how many months or whatever. But the period between the appeal process between when he actually has to report to jail and the way this speedy trial is going, because that trial went by quick. I don't care what anybody says, that trial went by like a snap of a finger. So if he's sentenced initially, and I think he will be sentenced to jail, I mean sentenced, I don't know if he'll be sent, and that's an important kind of difference there. I don't necessarily think he'll be sent to jail, but he might get sentenced. And in that period of sentencing and reporting to jail, now that this new Supreme Court decision may have some impact on if he's going to have immunity in this case or not, that may determine if he actually gets sent to jail. Now, like I said, I don't think necessarily. I think there will be some sort of intervention, whether by the appeal process or otherwise. There will be some legal intervention to make sure Trump does not actually spend a day in jail. I find it really hard to believe he's going to spend a day in jail. Like I said, there may be a sentencing, but that appeal process, I think, especially with this new Supreme Court decision, they might, appeal for a later sentencing date. They might appeal to say, hey, we know you sentenced and you may have made your decision actually before you decided, before you announced what the sentencing is going to be. And now this Supreme Court decision might have an impact on the shift of that. So my initial reaction on if he is going to be sentenced to jail, probably at this juncture right now, probably he's going to be sentenced to jail. I don't know if he'll be sent there. Now, in terms of a vice presidential pick, this has been a question that, I'm gonna say something that a lot of people like that follow me, political nerds that follow me. Okay, I think it's the most important, non-important decision that Trump is ever going to make. And I hope that makes sense, and I'll explain what I mean. The vice president legitimately is the least impactful cabinet appointment that he can have. What we should really be caring about is who he's going to put as Secretary of State, Defense, and the Army to make sure we don't get into foreign wars, who he's going to pick to demolish the CIA, the FBI, the ATF, and what Attorney General he's going to appoint to go after the people who have been destroying our country for the last 4 years, and also during his administration as well. That should be our concerns. Whether that makes people mad or not, I know everybody loves the Veep stakes every single year. And back when I was a college student, I was a part of that. Like I was like, who's going to pick? Is it pick Ben Carson, Ted Cruz? Then he picks Mike Pence. Okay, so I think we're going to be disappointed again. I think it's going to be somebody like Doug Burgum. Okay, like Doug Burgum, I'm sure is a nice guy. He probably has no ambition to, backstab Trump, or has no presidential ambition of his own in 2028. He's older, or whatever. I'm sure he's a good dude, but he's also a really bad governor. Okay, he's not a good governor of North Dakota at all. He didn't veto trans kids getting transitioned. Okay, not the best conservative choice, but is he the safest choice for somebody like Trump, who wants a spotlight, who at this point after the debate probably needs a spotlight? I prefer somebody like Ben Carson. That's always been my guy. I would like Ben Carson. I would like J.D. Vance. I would like, personally, he's not even been mentioned, but I would like Josh Hawley. Okay, I like these kind of firebrand, people that kind of identify with me and you in terms of our ideology. But I know more than likely with somebody like Trump, they're going to want somebody who doesn't steal the spotlight. So I'll say this. I hope it's J.D. Vance. I hope it's somebody like Ben Carson. My prediction is Doug Burgum. And I think it's between those three. I don't think anybody else. Marco Rubio. I think Marco Rubio, Doug Burgum, Ben Carson, J.D. Vance. Those are your 3 to 4 people that are more than likely going to be at least being debated at getting picked. But unfortunately, I think we're going to end up with Doug Burgum. And like I said, he's somebody I'm not excited about. And I don't think he's a good governor or a good choice at all. But does he really matter in the long term of things? No. So I'm not going to get mad about it. I'm gonna let people know, like, hey, okay, don't idolize this guy. Like, he's not a good governor at all. He's been okay. We'll see how he is as a VP. Okay, he'll probably cut the ribbons well. All right, great. But let's pay attention to his cabinet appointments. Let's see if he gets a Secretary of State. Okay, don't make a Rex Tillerson pick. Don't make a Nikki Haley pick. Don't make a Mike Pompeo pick. Okay, don't make a Jeff Sessions pick. Actually go for somebody who is conservative, who is Christian, who is willing to tackle the issues and not get us into foreign wars and demolish these state departments that are robbing us of our individual liberties every day. And let's care about that before we care about who's going to be VP.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you to a point. I think that the VP right now, though, as you know, there are layers to political individuals. There are some individuals that are just focused on the headlines. There are some individuals that are completely apolitical altogether. There are individuals that really nerd out over electoral politics. There are some that just like to talk about political theory. And so, that being said, I think that there's sort of that middle level of people that are involved in politics, but are not necessarily as into the wonky technical stuff that maybe you and I might follow. I think those are the individuals that are wanting a signal. I think the VP is a signal. Is Trump preparing someone to take the reins when he is no longer the head of the movement? Because whether you love Trump or not, he's the head of the movement. That's just indisputable at this point. Right. When he passes it on to a J.D. Vance, that to me says that he's passing it on to someone who could be appealing to the Rust Belt. Someone who understands populism, who understands the working class's woes. Obviously, his best-selling book is honestly easy material to hand off to people. In fact, I would advise you, hand out J.D. Vance's book to people now, because whether J.D. Vance ends up being a VP pick or not, J.D. Vance, you can easily hand someone Hillbilly Elegy and not even mention the fact that he's a Republican senator. And these people are going to just fall in love with Vance's story. And then, they later, if he ends up being a pick for VP, great. You've already introduced him to some people and sort of softened his image prior to him being associated as Trump Jr. That's what the media is going to do. They're going to lead you to believe that he's also super Nazi Hitler, just like Trump. So that's something that I would say is kind of an easy tool with J.D. Vance. When it comes to just marketing him to your Aunt Sally, who's apolitical. So that's the one thing I will say about the VP pick. I think that signaling is important. When it comes to the cabinet, though, I tend to agree with you. I think that Trump needs to announce some of these cabinet picks, because if he does, let's say, go to jail and he's taken off the board, or even if it's a house arrest, I personally think that they have to, the left has to balance. Do they want to make a martyr out of him, or do they want to win, politically? And I think something like a house arrest situation will allow Trump to be at a disadvantage, electorally, without necessarily making him as much of a martyr. Because the moment you hear that he's house arrested to Mar-a-Lago, his beautiful mansion, no one really is the victim narrative doesn't come across as well. So they have that choice: martyr or electoral victory. But either way, let's say that he is put away, whether it's house arrest or otherwise. I think his cabinet picks can really help build the hype for his administration, and it can also show some of those individuals who are Republican voters, but maybe they were turned off from Trump because of his handling of COVID. And now you and I could probably talk all day long about the falsehoods and red herrings that are in that whole argument, because there are some, but there's also some truths that that these people are going to hammer Trump on. Him being able to show a really aggressive AG, or these high level positions, I think that signals that he's learned his lesson. When so many of us complain, the biggest issue of Trump is his personnel picks. I think if he shows us that he's learned his lesson in that's immediately going to bring back some of those people, and that might give him an extra couple percentages. That's going to be so key in swing states. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that so as Trump presidency went on, I mean, I think you saw that infiltration of like John Kelly. You saw that infiltration of like Mad Dog Mathis, all that bunch that were so establishment. They were so intertwined in keeping Trump establishment as possible. Like, they know that he was a kind of my favorite joke from John Mulaney is a horse loose in the hospital, right? I don't know if you ever heard that joke, but try to keep the horse calm, right? And I don't think he needs to be kept calm in this lame duck term. Like, we need somebody who is willing to dismantle the establishment from the inside out. And I think that holding himself accountable has been something that Trump has done. I mean, he's bragged about firing these people. He's bragged about, trying that he's learned his lesson, like that. I made a mistake and they won't have another job. You've heard him talk about Nikki Haley. You've heard him talk about Mike Pence. You've heard him talk about, even Paul Ryan. People forget, like, when Paul Ryan was the guy for House Speaker, like, Trump was like, yeah, Paul Ryan, yeah, good, yeah, you go ahead and nominate Paul Ryan. Like, he was on the forefront of getting the people not only in his cabinet but in Senate and congressional leadership. Like, he was responsible for those people getting picked. So, looking back to the Mitt Romneys of the world that wanted power, he met with Mitt Romney about being Secretary of State. I think that now he's learned his lesson in a lot of ways. And like I said, I mean, some of his endorsements, have ended up not being good. But I think in terms of his circle, like, if you can keep true to that Steve Bannon circle in terms of like who he wanted when he first got in, you saw the duality. It was Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon. Like, you had the Reince Priebus Republicans and the cabinet picks that Priebus suggested, and you have the Steve Bannon picks, right? Like we need that Bannon-esque approach to a cabinet formation. Like, we need people who are going to be like people like Mike Davis as the Attorney General. We need people, even like I would like to see like Bill Haggerty, okay, like from our own state of Tennessee. Like, I would like to see him being Secretary of State, like Marsha Blackburn doing something, Vivek Ramaswamy having him do something, even if he's not really VP material. I would love to see him as Chief of Staff or Press Secretary. Like, get these people who have been gone after. Like, I put people there that have been attacked by the left, who have actually been through it and want to fight back. Not people who are going to steady the ship, because a lame duck term, as we've studied about in multiple governorships and Senate, even with John McCain, like whenever he was the senator in Arizona, like, he really took on that maverick label. I mean, as unfortunate it was for the Republican Party, like, he really took on that maverick label because he probably knew he was in his last term because of his health. So he was doing whatever he wanted to. Trump needs to have that same mentality. He needs to be a lame duck and take advantage of that, because he has no reason to not do the things that he wants. Like, more than likely now, and I've talked to a lot of my Democratic friends over the weekend, like, what they fear now, and this was not really on the table, at least in my opinion, because I'm an internal pessimist. I always thought that the Republicans for a long time were going to win this presidency and we're going to win the Senate because of Joe Manchin and John Tester. But now that Biden's done so bad, and he's going to be their nominee, I think that Trump Biden could potentially hurt the Democrats down ballot for House races. So if we have the same scenarios we did in 2017, where we have a Republican president, Republican Senate, and Republican Congress, Trump has got to take advantage right then. Like on in January, you have to start right then. You have to dismantle. You have to get the economy back on track. You have to get out of all these foreign relation deals. Pull troops out of wherever we have troops at. Cut Ukrainian aid. Cut whatever aid we have to a country we're giving aid to, and make that intervention the forefront. Like try to dismantle it from all over internationally, with foreign relations, with domestic relations, from the state departments all the way down to the relationships you have with governors in separate states. Like make sure that we change it from the inside out. And to do that, you have to be, because it's going to take a little while also, once all those cabinets resign, because that's what always happens. All the Secretary of States are given a letter by the president saying, hey, I am requesting your resignation by this date. All that's going to happen within the first month of the presidency. So after that, you got to start nominating. You got to get Senate confirmation. You're going to have the Senate. Make sure that there are people that are ready and willing to go. Make sure their records are not falsified, and let's go. Like, let's get all these people confirmed as soon as possible. Let's reform the federal judgeships. Let's make sure that if there are any appointments in the Supreme Court, I don't think there will be, because of how much of a freak out the Democrats are having about Chevron and about the immunity case. Like, I don't believe any of the 3 Supreme Court justices that are liberal right now are going to be willing to retire unless one of them literally is forced to, or their health does not allow them to continue. Like, that's the only thing that's going to let the Democrats give up a Supreme Court choice. But if that did happen, let's speed through that process. Let's act like Democrats. And I've said that for so long. If you tell me that I was saying that when I was a college student at UT and I was part of college Republicans, I go, what are you talking about? But Democrats are willing to speed through any process to sustain their power. We have to be willing to use our power, Connor. Like, we have to. Like, the libertarian in me is gone. I wrote that article with Glenn Jacobs, and I love Glenn, and I love a lot of people in the libertarian movement, and I still hold a lot of libertarian positions, like when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to dismantling the deep state, all that kind of stuff. I still hold those policies true, and I can relate to libertarians on that. But when they start telling me that we can't use our power, no, like, we have to at this point, like, to save our country, to save our children, to save our families. Like, we have got to take advantage of the power that we're going to be wielding here potentially over the next few months. Like, we've got, if we win, we have got to use the power that we win. And if we don't do that, our country's dead. Like, I know people say, like, this the most important elections of our lifetime. They say it every single election, but now I'm really seeing it, like, my involvement, like we've said, in church politics. Like, I see the establishments of our country, like, going to the wayside, and not because it's really intentional. It's moreover like we're letting it happen, and that's the worst part of it. It's not like we're changing it completely. We're not just going from being, conservative Christian all of a sudden over to progressive left. It's been a slow erosion because of the people that we rely on are getting ran over and stepped over like a doormat, and that can't happen. So we have to take advantage of our power. We have to be willing to fight, and Trump has to point people to those positions that are willing to take that fight to the establishment. And like I said, like you said, VP, if it's a next choice, the next upcoming Trump guy, then, like I said, I'm for Vance all the way. That's who I want. I would want somebody like him or Holly leading the charge. I've always said, if he goes, just sustain and steer the ship, probably going to be Berger McCarson. If he wants to pick his king, the next guy, it's going to be Vance or Vance Rubio or somebody like Hawley. But in terms of his cabinet choices, go all out. Appoint the most radical, far right. And I want to keep skinning far right by my definition. You don't want to know who my far right appointments would be, but somebody who's willing to identify with our movement, like willing to identify with the MAGA base and the America First base, the culturally conservative Christian base. Like, we'll put those people in those positions, and let's fight and let's take the power back to them.
Yeah, I completely agree. You mentioned your piece with Glenn Jacobs, so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Glenn Jacobs and your involvement with him, because he is mayor of Knox County, which is a very large county here in Tennessee. And I know you and I kind of mentioned in brief conversation while we were hanging out at the SBC, kind of some future potential candidates for governor of Tennessee, and I think Glenn Jacobs is definitely someone that has enough weight behind him to throw his hat in the ring, and pursue that. So that said, I've got a large portion of my audience is from the great state of Tennessee, and so you tell us a little bit more about Glenn Jacob. Of course, you can go into your piece if you'd like in a moment, but I'm just curious because I really do. If I'm making early predictions, and of course, 2026 is centuries away in politics. But if I was to make bets, I would definitely say that Glenn Jacobs is one that will probably throw his hat in the ring. So, how'd you get involved with Glenn Jacobs, and give us your overall assessment of him and as a person and as a politician?
Yeah, Glenn's truly an amazing person. I first met Glenn back in 2018. I was a campaign manager, but way back when, 6 years ago, I was a campaign manager for my local state representative, Jeremy Fajan, who is the current House Republican Caucus Chairman in the Tennessee State House, and he became pretty close with Jeremy. Him and Jeremy kind of hold those libertarian philosophies and being anti-government, being anti-deep state, and want to reform. I think they aligned on a number of civil asset forfeiture was one of their main issues that they aligned on, and really got to talking. And I remember one day me and Jeremy went out to Knoxville. It was actually for Tim Burchett's. I think it was Tim Burch's. It may have been Glenn's himself, but it was this basically school supply giveaway that they do in Knox County every year. It is at a warehouse in West Knoxville. And I went out there and we met at Jimmy John's, and Glenn got there before Jeremy did, and I got there before both of them did. So me and Glenn literally just sat there and talked for about 30 minutes before Jeremy got there. Jeremy got there, and we literally from that moment on, when we started sharing philosophies and really aligned on a number of ideologies that me and him agreed on, started texting a little bit back and forth, took a picture at the event, and I've stayed in contact ever since. Which is a wild thing for me, being an old school wrestling fan like I was when I was a kid. Yeah. To be sitting right across from Kane and just talking about politics is a wild thing. But Glenn I think he's done an amazing job. And the thing about it is people don't give Glenn enough credit. He followed an amazing mayor. Like he followed somebody who was one of the most liked. I mean, Burchett went from being like winning his election by like 53 to winning his election by like 82%. Like, and that's as a Republican nominee. That's not as like this nonpartisan thing as they do in cities. Like he was a Republican nominee in Knox County and won by like 82-17. Like it was something insane. And Glenn took that over and has still sustained success and is still as well liked in Knox County as he is. Like you will not hear, besides from the partisan Democrats who are going to hate any Republican now, like those polarized Democrats, Glenn has done an amazing job on the economy. He's done an amazing job being a voice. He goes to all these events. He goes out. One of the best things that Glenn does, and it's one of the best things that I see, is he goes out to local businesses and promotes them, and he gives them people's names. He goes out and meets these small business owners and tells them, like, you matter. Let me know what I can do for you. Do I need to look at property lines? Do I need to look at our economy? Do I need to make different decisions? Would you be okay with this business coming in? What is going to hurt your business? Will it hurt local business? Like the fact that he goes out to these small business owners, talks to them, and has these conversations with them is what makes him a great mayor, and that's what makes any mayor a great mayor. I think the power of mayor oftentimes is a little bit overestimated on what they can actually do. It's really up to the city councils, the county commissions, the city councils, the school boards. Like it's really a lot of those are dictated to the boards that are controlling the county. But Glenn has to sustain good relationships, and any mayor has to sustain good relationships with their civilians and their civilian bodies. So I think Glenn does a really good job at that. And to be as well known as he is, and to be as famous, I mean, the guy's a WWE Hall of Famer, has been all over the world, and people know him all over the world. He gets recognized literally anywhere I've ever been with him. He gets recognized. Like we went to Diana Harshbarger's hoedown, and admittedly, like there's a lot of people that don't even know he's a mayor, right? Like they just know Kane, right? And that's people from East Tennessee. Like they just know who that is, and he's so humble, and that's one of the best things about him is that he takes pictures of everybody. He shakes everybody's hand, and he's not that outspoken. He's a great public speaker. He's awesome at podcast appearances. He's awesome at speeches, but he isn't somebody to go and be braggadocious. He's very humble. He's very but he doesn't like people to brag on him, and that's the most amazing. That's the most amazing attribute in any politician is somebody who does not think too much of themselves, can make fun of themselves a little bit, and is willing to not want to grab that power and hang on to it. And I know that's ironic to be talking about somebody who may be running for governor, and hopefully is running for governor. But with Glenn, I believe he's got a good heart, and I legitimately believe that somebody like Glenn, and this goes for any statewide office, you need somebody that is not just spending days and days and days in committee hearings in Washington and to run an actual state. And that's no slight in any congressman, because there's been amazing governors that were former congressmen or former senators. Like I think Mike Braun is going to make a great governor in Indiana, but we have to look at like who knows how to run a county and like who knows how to run a city, and who knows, and this is somebody who went from being a small business owner, a guy who was a celebrity who wanted to come back home. Like Glenn moved here with his family to Tennessee after his career. Like he came here to live and build a life. He had an insurance company with his wife, and he was just trying to make a good living, and that he was called. Like he was called to serve Knox County and called to serve East Tennessee. And I've met his family, and I've known Glenn for 6 years, and me and him talk nearly every week, if not every 2 weeks. And I think he's an amazing dude. And I'd be if he was. I'm as official Cock County GOP chair. I can't endorse anybody, but I think Glenn that would make an unbelievable, fantastic governor. And like I said, I'm not making any endorsement, but if he were to win the primary and he were to, of course, be the Democrat in the general election, he would be an amazing governor. And I look really forward to whatever God leads Glenn to do. I know he's going to succeed, and I think he's an amazing dude and an amazing mayor.
Well, it's good to hear you give him such high praise. I think that whoever ends up replacing Bill Lee needs to be to Bill Lee's right. I've got some complaints with Bill Lee. Obviously, he's better than a Gretchen Whitmer or a Gavin Newsom, but that's a very, very, very low bar. I really do think that Tennessee has a lot of issues. We have, I think, some of the best people. In a way, I think that we have the most fertile soil for a real right-wing dominant state to really lead the entire country, because we have some of the best people. We have some of the most thickest cultural Christianity as well. But I really think that the way that our state operates, I mean, we are not nearly as bold as we should be. Love him or hate him. I know there's mixed feelings after the primary, but DeSantis did an amazing job with Florida. And he really showed us in the height of COVID the importance of a good governor and what a good governor can truly do when they actually have a spine. And I think we need to see that again in whoever ends up becoming governor of Tennessee, after the election of 2026. And obviously, again, it's a long ways away, but I want to pivot directions for a bit then, Cody, just because I know that our time is running short, and I want to be respectful of your time, and I appreciate it. But I wanted to at least briefly talk about the SBC and why you care about the SBC specifically. I think something that's really unique that you're doing is you have been able to write about the SBC and have it published in Human Events, and have people like Jack Posobiec talking to you about the Southern Baptist Convention. It's kind of an overlap that is rarely seen, in the online spaces, and it's really great to see you bringing an awareness of the SBC to individuals who may be politically minded and enjoy the work that Jack Posobiec is doing, but really have no idea of what's going on in the church political world. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, so I first really got involved with being interested in attending the SBC and getting involved in the SBC issues by a guy who I admired beforehand, a guy named my friend and yours, Senator Dusty Devers. Was a very big fan of Dusty, and I followed his primary race, paid attention to the SBC president or former SBC president Bart Barber, donating to his primary opponent. And of course, Connor, that's my bread and butter is politics. that's what I pay attention to. And I was glad to see somebody who kind of embraced that Christian nationalism, being a state legislature. And of course, I love state legislation. Like I love, paying attention to the Tennessee state legislature. That's where I got my start in politics, was being a campaign manager for a state rep. So I paid close attention to Dusty's race, was thrilled to see him win. And I followed him ever since. And he started talking about, issues in the SBC. And I'd heard the SBC before, of course, and I'm part of an SBC church. And me and my pastor had several conversations about, about people in the past, David Platts and J.D. Greer and a bunch of different people that were trying to reform the SBC to be a progressive and adopting the ways of the world to run the largest Protestant organization in the world. And I started to pay a lot more attention. And I started to see a lot of similarities, like sort of in politics and in church politics, in the way like the establishment was trying to keep it the way the SBC has been since J.D. Greer and even before him. And when Dusty started kind of talking about these issues, I'm like, whoa, like I didn't realize the SBC had gone woke. Maybe there had been some stagnation, and maybe there had been some people who were just kind of trying to keep it on the tracks and not trying to change it in the way that it should be changed. But I wasn't aware of how much it actually changed from the outside, from the inside out. And I started paying more attention, starting reading William Wolf's stuff, starting paying attention to people like you, people like Jeff Wright, and, really, really started okay, I could see myself maybe getting involved here. Not sure how I can help, not sure what I can do. But so I just decided randomly, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna try and take this Christian nationalism, read about it. I read Stephen Wolf's book. I paid attention to Douglas Wilson and a couple of others that have kind of talked about Christian nationalism a bit before, and try to read up on what this actually means, because I was also seeing that moniker. I was seeing in the conservative political world, what it meant. Why are we being called Christian nationalists? I'm like, I'm a Christian. I'm also a nationalist. Okay, does that make me a Christian nationalist? Am I what they're saying that I am? Okay, so let me read the ideology. And I'm like, well, yeah, probably. So I really just started reading about what it meant, really started reading about the issues within the SBC, trying to read about, the demon. The thing that really set me off the most to get involved in the SBC and with Dusty, I read the Rolling Stone piece on Dusty Devers, trying to paint him out to be this evil theocrat that was simply just standing for, I'm like, okay, what did he say? What does he do? I'm like, okay, there are all these issues. Okay, he wants to ban porn, check. He wants to, try to abolish abortion, check. He wants to abolish the income tax in Oklahoma. I'm like, well, okay, what? Okay, well, I don't disagree with anything that he has to say. So I look at how the mainstream media and the world was attacking this man. And then I started to look at okay, how is his institution that he was so proud of, that he ran for vice chair of, okay, what's changing within it? Right. And then I saw, that the SBC was being ran by somebody and Bart Barber that was kind of, adopting to the ways of Brent Leatherwood, was trying to, adopt the ERLC as a lobbying fist to try to form Congress, because the SBC is, like of them or not, I mean, if you're in the world, they have a say in the way our Congress and the way that politics work. We're the largest Protestant organization and formation in the country, and we have power when it comes to influence in the political realm and the cultural realm. So I was like, okay, so let me write about this. So I wrote a piece called Christian Nationalism, Dusty Devers, and Conservative Bravery. I forgot what the list and order there is, but I published it for American Reformer, who people that I also met at the SBC actually. And I started getting a little bit of feedback from the SBC people. Dusty messaged me and said, hey, how do you want to get involved? And I said, okay, great. I do want to get involved. And, I asked my pastor, I'm like, can I go to the SBC this year? Are we an SBC church? Or, I think we pay our dues. Is everything good for me to go? And he's like, yeah. He said, hey, I started telling him all the problems. Me and him had conversations before. And Chad Webb is the pastor. And he said, let's do it. Let's send you. Let's go have representation. Let's try to see if we can save our our organization. And unfortunately, at the SBC, things like the law maybe didn't pass. People like, David Allen were elected president. People like Jared Moore and elected president. But I was glad to see the movement. Like, I was legitimately glad to see people like you, people like Jeff, people like Dusty, Michael Clary, and others there, people like David Allen, that do want to see change in the SBC, or at least want to return it to the moral majority. Like, we want to see that the Adrian Rogers of that era try to be back in prominence, or at least people who are sympathizers, or at least identify with those ideologies. Because we do not need to give the way to the world. Like, the ways of the world should have no impact on what the SBC does. We do not need to cave to progressivism, and we don't need to cave to secularists. Like, why are we trying to connect people to come to our organization and to our churches if they're trying to disagree with our biblical doctrines? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. And I can't believe that even has to be said. And the fact that that even has to be said or argued about is why the SBC really needs to return back to its form of the 1980s with Adrian Rogers and the moral majority of that era. So I saw that, and I was glad to be a messenger. Like, people ask me, like, did you have fun? And I'm like, okay, what's your definition of fun? Like, did I feel like I was fulfilling God's will? And did I feel like that I was going to a place where I was having a role? Yes. But was it just fun and games? And was I standing up and dancing and singing and everything? I was like, I heard a great quote, like, I want to get down to business. And that's what we were there for. I presented a motion that got passed to next year's convention, I believe, and it goes from the executive board. And that's something that I did not see myself doing. I thought I was just kind of there to vote and provide moral support. But Dusty came to a few of us, and I think it was a motion that I think that it would be good to move the cooperative program funds from the ERLC to the International Mission Board. I think that that's something hopefully that can happen, or at least gets discussed. And the fact that it's even getting debated about and got voted on by the body to be going for the executive board is a win. Because I think that to fix the SBC, we have to do a few things. We have to elect better people. We have to elect conservatives to lead our convention, and we have to get rid of the ERLC, defund it, or ensure that whoever is in control of the ERLC is doing the right things in directing it to the betterment of the SBC and not for the betterment of who lines their pockets or their directors' pockets. So I see the same problems in the SBC that I kind of see in the GOP, and I know those two don't really need to connect in terms of the ways of the world don't need to contact our ways of faith. But when you look at structural change, when you look at what needs to happen in order to see change, like the SBC has to see change in order to change. Like it has to be rebuilt. The infrastructure has got to be rearranged. And that's what I saw in the SBC. That's why I wrote about it. That's why I admire people like Dusty, yourself, and others that are fighting every day to keep the SBC and try to bring it back to the moral majority of the 1980s. And I see that so much with the new movement. And hopefully we see changes. And even if we didn't win on the law amendment and on a number of different issues and a number of people that we wanted there, it's kind of like the compromise candidate. Like, I think I wish the best for Clint Presley. At least he was pro-law amendments. I'll pray for the man every day. I pray for his leadership. And like I said, at least he was pro-law amendment, and he was we didn't win on the law amendment, but still 61% of the body still voted. We just didn't get 2/3 majority. And that was going against everybody who was against us. That was against the mainstream media. That was against the SBC establishment. That was against people like Brent Leatherwood and others. You saw the 91-9 kicking Alexandria out for ordaining women pastors. You saw that. So there's some sort of disconnect, and we really just have to work on bridging that disconnect between Alexandria, the decision on Alexandria, and the law amendment. If we do that, we can win in the next couple of years. I don't know if it's going to be reformed entirely in the way that we want to reform, as we talked about at the SBC convention, but I think we're on the right path. We've got the right people involved, and we just got to keep recruiting, man. We just have to continue to reform. And I really believe we can do that over the next few years.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that you did a great job breaking that down, and I'm hoping that some of what your work with human events can possibly highlight the SBC for individuals who maybe are members of an SBC church and don't realize the overlap between how SBC affects the culture and, by extension, politics, with Brent Leatherwood doing things like advocating for red flag laws in the state of Tennessee, for example. Who's this Brent Leatherwood guy? Well, he's a bureaucrat of the SBC, and the SBC is the only way to hold him accountable. And that's going to take time and effort to get this man who's essentially using tithe dollars to attack those individuals' political desires ultimately. So I hope that that we can wake more people up to the importance of the SBC while simultaneously having fun with it and making bad guys frustrated, and of course talking politics is a lot of great fun, and I've really enjoyed our conversation. That said, I've kept you at about an hour, so where can people go to keep up with you and everything that you're doing?
So you can find me on Twitter and Truth Social at Kenny Cody TM. That's my username. You can find all of my article archives on a website called muckrack.com. That's a journalist archive that has around 115 of my articles that I've written since 2020, all on there. And you can find me Kenny Cody on Instagram, Facebook, wherever that I may be on social media. I'm sure there's not a lot of Kenny Codys in the world, so hopefully you can find who I am on there. And Connor, really appreciate you having me on, man. I'm glad to be talking about these different kinds of issues. This is a unique podcast experience because it combines, like you've said, politics with the Christian culture, and I think that's a conversation that's worth having. So I appreciate you having me on, brother, and I hope to be back on soon.
Of course. Well, thank you, listeners. Feel free to go to our Substack, forgeandanvil.substack.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.